For the scripture this morning, I'm actually going to skip this because I want to talk about it in the sermon. So you can just put up the slide. But in the 13th chapter of John, we have this passage of where Jesus is washing the disciples' feet. It's the story of how that happened. It's the story of where Jesus tells us to follow in God, in His footsteps, and to do this for each other. And you can read that in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. And even though it is Palm Sunday, what I would like to talk to you about this morning is something that we talked about last year. And it's about the thing we call a love feast. And some of you here have known what that is. Some don't. Some don't participate. Some do. So I want to explain why I think that this is a very important ritual, if you will, or a very important sacrament that we hold in the history of our denomination and our faith, and why it holds such a value to us. Also to encourage you to pray about coming this Thursday night to be with us, to be in this special service. I've always been in a love-hate relationship with the word love feast. I'm not sure why, because it just sounds funny at first. Then you're like, what? A feast of love? And then it sounds like we're in the 1960s. All of these things. But that's exactly what we do, right? We say, well, we're going to come, and this is about love, and this is about being in community, and this is about being together and holding each other up. At the same time, it's about reminding myself how much I am loved by God and how much I need God to come and breathe. I don't know about you this morning, but like when Isaac was doing the prelude and we were just sitting here, there was something life-giving about being able to quiet yourself from the chaos of this world and just breathe in and listen to the music that can open our senses or do whatever that is that we do to connect to God, quiet us enough to pay attention. You know, I posted a picture yesterday of what my Doberman did to my living room, right? But I was thinking about it, when I'm training the dog, and he really is a good trained dog. He had a moment of weakness. He was tempted, and he had to give in. But when you want to train the dog, right, you have his attention. And of course, dogs are like us. They get distracted. And I have to sometimes just touch him a little bit, right? I don't hurt him or anything. I just tap him. And it just reminds the dog, be in the moment. Pay attention to John, because I'm probably going to get a treat at the end of this, right? So I kept thinking about how many times does God tap me to say, pay attention, you're about to miss something. Pay attention, you're about to miss a blessing. Pay attention and be quiet so that you can connect to me even though there is chaos all around you and you don't know where to look, right? So it just reminded me of that. And this is, for me, and I can't speak for everybody, but for me, as much as I can't sit still, as much as I can't be quiet and I get distracted, I look forward to this love feast because it forces me. It forces me to come and come face to face with God, but it quiets me. It is an hour that we give that is quiet and somber and relational and huge as far as the spiritual significance for it. So we're going to go through this morning and kind of lay out, this is what we do in the service and why. So the first part of the service is that we will meet here in the sanctuary at 7 o'clock and have a moment of reflection. In the 5th chapter of Matthew, in the 11th chapter of Corinthians, we have Jesus and Paul talking about how important it is to make sure that when we come to God, when we participate in communion, that we come in the right manner. Paul says that if we come to communion unworthy, we will have the judgment of God put upon us. That you might as well not even come to communion because you're not doing it right to begin with. So we meet in here. And it serves a couple functions. It serves a time where I can come and quiet myself before we start the actual service in the fellowship hall, where we can come and breathe in and breathe out and just be quiet between the world that has been so noisy for us. And then it is a time for me to take, again, we've been talking about these confessions and coming to God during Lent. So this is a time for me to say, all right, Lord, here I am. I'm trying to be serious. But I got a lot of junk. I got a lot of things that you have to take care of. I have broken relationships. I have broken this. I'm falling in this area. Whatever it may be, we lay ourselves bare before God so that we can prepare ourselves. Now, in the olden days, that also served a time where some people would get up at the end of that reflection time, walk across to the other side of the church and try to make up with somebody that they don't have a good relationship with. And they try to make sure, because that's another aspect of it. That's why in the old days, too, the deacons would show up at your house before Love Feast and knock on the door and say, all right, John, we're going to decide if you're even worthy to come to Love Feast. You know, so tell me what the problem is or who you have a problem with and what we can do to fix this. And it's all about community and saying we can't come to the table if we are broken with each other. So we have to come to God and we have to come to each other. It is this whole body. That's why it took it serious, because the whole body needs to be healthy. So we start here, we breathe in God, and we breathe out the chaos that is our lives. It just takes a moment to center ourselves, to put us in that right headspace. Then after 10, 15 minutes, we will go out into the sanctuary where we will start with the fellowship meal. And this fellowship meal is a simple meal. And I think I've said before, I'll never forget, one person it's called sop. And somebody kept saying, well, we're having slop tonight. And that has always stuck in my head. So every time I see it, I'm like, well, that's slop. Right? But, just a simple meal that is supposed to remind us of something similar to what would have been at the Last Supper. We break bread together. We have this fellowship because it is about being together. So we sit at the table and we understand that Christ is at the center of our relationships, and then we fall into that as well. It symbolizes the sharing of life. On our Facebook page for the Living Stones group, one of the taglines says, doing life together. And I love that, because that is exactly what we do here in the church, is we do life together. We share our life with each other. And while we may not talk to everybody all of the time, we are still part of this family that gets together. So we sit around the fellowship meal and share our lives. And you won't hear anything deeply theological being discussed around the tables, and nobody's over there sitting, wallowing in how bad we are. We're just talking about life. You will hear random conversations from around the different tables just about what is going on in life. And it is a blessing sometimes to sit at a table with people who maybe you don't talk to all that much, to get to know them, because it brings us together. And we realize that God says, come together, fulfill each other, love each other. Food is powerful. It brings people together. It is, you can think of certain foods right now that if I said, you probably could smell and taste them and it would bring you back to a moment in time. Right? Or you can think of all the big things in your family, all the bad news, good news, whatever it is, there is usually food probably. There's food at weddings and funerals and food at family gatherings. When the church gets together, we eat. It brings us together. It's what brings us to the table as sisters and brothers. So we eat together and we share. Then we go to the communion, which for me, again, my own opinion, there's something mystical about communion. It is one of the only rituals that I can do, or sacraments that I do within the church, that truly brings me to this thin place. And if you remember when I talk about the thin place, I talk about those moments where God and us are very close, where the space between us seems to come down very close and you can feel something. There's nothing quite like it for me in the sacraments of the church and what we do. There are moments, there are sacred moments all the time. But this mystical experience of this spiritual time where I can just go to God, and even though I'm breaking bread with my brother or sister across from me, I am alone with God. And it is a time like no other where God can dip down and say, John, I know you are hurting, or I know that you are weak and whatever that may be, and I will fill you. It is a time for me to come and say, Lord, here I am. Broken or not, use me, fill me, help me fulfill what you are calling me to do. There's something life-giving about it, refreshing. And it doesn't seem like that because we do it, and we don't do it weekly, but even doing it quarterly, sometimes it could become just something you do without thinking about it. But when you have this moment where it brings you back and connects you to something ancient, something that Christ did with his disciples over 2,000 years ago, and it connects us to our past, the history of this church, all of the faith that has been brought up to it, it is a very, very holy moment. Even if it lasts only a few minutes, it is soul giving, soul giving. Here I am, God, renew me and use me. So then, from the bread and cup, we go to the time that everybody loves. And this is the reason why people don't come to Love Feast, because they don't want to do this, right? And it's not that they don't like every other part of it, but they say, I do not want to touch somebody's feet. When I joined the Church of the Brethren, I had a heart-to-heart with God saying, why did you bring me to this denomination? I've never done that before, right? Because I'm like, I don't want to do this. But this, again, is this sacred act that is supposed to help us remember what Christ stood for, that servanthood and humility, and it brings us together to say that we are all on the same page, that we are all equal in this moment, that we all get tired, that all our feet get dirty from the journeys that we are on, whether we are down here or up there or young or old or whatever it is. Last year there was I think about 100 people here for Love Feast, and we had people from as little as Brody Ovalhoser up until probably in their 90s. And I can't remember who took the picture, but it was of somebody older washing Brody's feet. That was a powerful image for me to say, this is why we do this. Because it connects all of us. It breathes life into us. And if we can get past the hang-ups of feet and all of this, we understand what that symbolizes. We understand why when Jesus got down on his hands and knees to wash his disciples' feet, how they did not want any part of that. And if you read the passage in John chapter 13, they'll protest. And they'll say, you can't do this. You're Jesus. You're not going to wash my feet. And if you're going to wash my feet, you might as well wash my whole body because I'm not clean. And Jesus says, stop talking and just pay attention. Right? Just you don't even know what you're talking about, he says. Just do this. Pay attention to this. You know, somebody asked me the other day, because I know that we do it a little different. Traditionally, feet washing was at the beginning of the service, right? And so when I came here, because I just want to upset everybody, I changed it to the end. And somebody asked me the other day, why did you do this? And that's not the first time I've been asked. There's nothing theological about it. I started that almost 20 years ago because some people said, I don't want to come to Love Feast and wash somebody's feet and then have to eat. So he said, well, I'll make it easy for you. We're going to eat first. Then you don't got to worry about it. So it's a psychological reason, not anything theological. But either way, it connects us. And for those of you that still aren't sure about that, here at Oakland we do something a little bit differently too, where we have hand washing tables. So if you don't want to wash somebody's feet, you can either pass or you can sit at a table where you wash each other's hands, and it is the same thing. The same symbolism and the same meaning. It brings us together. It builds community. It builds the body. It is one of those things that, unfortunately, our churches, this is a dying act. Less and less people participate in it. But I want to encourage people to participate in it, because if they give it a chance, and I hear it all of the time, people will say, I didn't want to come, but I'm glad I did. I am surprised at how much this was a holy time. Holy time. So I encourage you to think about joining us, because these acts that we do, from the examination to the meal to communion to the washing of each other's feet or hands, all serves to build us up together, to build the relationships that we have and the foundations that we have, so that we can continue the journey that takes so much out of us. And also, it reminds us that before it gets better, it's going to get worse. Because you have this holy experiment. You're okay, I'm with God, we're having dinner. But you kind of know, but Friday's about to happen. Something bad is coming. But then Sunday shows up. And we make it through because we hold each other, we do life together, and we are blessed together. We also do it because Jesus in that gospel says, now I have shown you what to do, go do it. Go do it. So as we close this morning, Todd and Mike are going to come up and show you how the act of foot washing actually takes place for those of you that aren't really sure what I'm talking about still. And just to remind us, because another part of what these foot washing does for us too, and the hand washing, it also symbolizes those vows we took in baptism, and to renew ourselves and say, how am I doing on my end of the deal to live for God? So let us take a moment and watch them participate in this sacred act. Thank you. Strange? Maybe. Not really sure? Maybe. I mean, by today's standard, this is different. I get it. But is it powerful? Is it humbling? Are we blessed? And we serve each other. Those outweigh the awkwardness and the weirdness of it. It is a time where we come to take serious the calls that we have, that we journey through Lent to come to this moment where we stand before God and our sisters and our brothers and we do life together. So as we continue this journey, I'm not going to guilt anybody to come, because if you come out of guilt, don't come. Think about it. Pray about it. Come experience this for yourself. And not just because I want you to, but because we need it. We need it. It gives us life, and it breathes, and it renews us and refreshes us. So let us pray. Lord, the journey of Lent has taken us to this week that a lot happens. To when you come into Jerusalem, and the same people that are cheering for you will be the same people that cry out for you to die. From the meal you shared with your disciples that they didn't even really understand, to the darkness of Friday and the light and hope of Easter. So Lord, wherever we may find you, whether we are right there with you or we're hiding in the shadows because life has beaten us up, bring us. Bring us to the table together to be renewed and refreshed. Come to this thin place to meet us through communion, and as we bow to serve each other. May we know that we are on this journey together, doing life together. We thank you for the many ways you come, the many ways you let us know that we are part of this ancient story of what you are doing. So be with us as we continue our journeys, and all of God's people said, if you'll please stand as they close us.